Hi guys, this is the Deafness article for Grand School. I realise it's actually been quite a while since I've recorded a video. So, I mean that's because I've been taking a last minute shot at Supernova, which I should just about make, fortunately. But starting December with about 30 something thousand VPPs to go isn't exactly the easiest way to achieve it. But I do have 3 parts of an Introduction to Poker Theory presentation prepared. I just haven't really had the time to record that yet, and now I'm going to be recording a session of 3 tables over 100 Zoom. It may, depending on how fast action is, move into 2 or 4 tables. But what I'm going to be trying to do with this video is try to cover less so very basic spots and get more into situations where there's something abnormal or something exploitative that I'm doing, or at least something which is not basically this is a c-bet here or this is going to be a fold pre, for instance. So without me jabbering on for too much longer, you'll see I'm burdened with Windows 8 there. Let's commence. So something I've been doing recently is I've been adjusting my pre-flop sizes a bit more, exploitatively. So we're 3xing our whole range on the button here, because there's a fish in a small blind, and we're min-raising the button here because the big blind folds too much to steals. Seems a pretty standard c-bet. Yeah, it's been quite irritating recently. Pretty much since the move to Stars UK, it hasn't been saving notes properly. I don't know why he's playing 100 Zoom. Yeah, since the move to Stars UK, the software hasn't been saving notes absolutely perfectly, and since the most recent update, you can't load notes too quickly. I think this is part of the range that we're going to want to c-bet here. We do want to check back some flush draws, but I think, and especially not flush draws, but I think especially considering this has relatively little showdown value right now compared to a hand like Ace King of Spades, I think c-betting is going to be better. Facing a check raise, I think either calling or 3-betting are fine options. If we do 3-bet rather, we're essentially 3-betting to look to get it in against flush draws, which we dominate. And ultimately, I feel like I don't really like having too many flop 3-betting ranges in position, because I feel that sort of negates our positional advantage somewhat. We're going to peel again here, because we're sometimes good. We can bluff some rivers, but if he jams here, I think we fold. I think the question now is whether we want to bluff jam ourselves or not. Ultimately, I think we don't, because I feel we have enough showdown value here to check. He can have a lot of 7-8. I mean, it's not great that we block that, but he can have Jack 10, maybe 10-8, and given all the draws miss, I don't think he's going to be jamming any marginal value hands that he may have check raised on the flop. So it's interesting that he shows up with that, and we are just going to quickly take a note of that. We're min raising the button here because the big blind's short, so it's not going to be too favourable for us to play our range by 2.5 or 3xing. But you'll possibly remember that in some of my previous videos, I had been min raising, but I think the games have changed such that regs are making fewer mistakes against min raisers, so we want to return to a size against which they're less confident of how to play, because a lot of the theory from the past couple of years has been on how to play against button min raisers. Big blinds and nits, we're going to min raise here anyway. I think we're probably going to want to check nearly everything on this flop. It's a situation where his range for calling 4-bets probably includes a decent amount of queens and jacks. I think he might feasibly 3-bet call those pre. And we only really have... we're not always going to be perceived to 4-bet queens in that spot, so we don't have that many nut combos on the flop. Whereas he could probably even have 10-9 suited. We're just going to fold this flop. Because we don't really have many bluffs here, we're going to... Oh, I guess we have some ace-x suited, which decided to check twice, so we can bet a reasonable size, but we don't want to go crazy. And if he jams here, he obviously just has ace-king, or is spazzing. I don't think we can fold this against a delayed c-bet. We do have some 7x, but this is pretty high in our range. For checking back the flop, because we're probably betting a lot of 7x and jack-x ourselves when he bets the river. So I do have a note which indicates that he's less likely to bluff after taking a passive line at some point or other, so I will fold this, but I think it's pretty close. We don't have enough 7x to only call with 7x if we want to be unexploitable, but I think perhaps that's going to be the correct exploitative deviation against this player in particular. Against reg, we should be leading this river because we have significantly more 9x than he does, but I think against a fish we can just check the side. It's tough against that sizing. I feel that here we can probably fold. His win-win saw flop is really low. Turning our hand into a bluff here would certainly be interesting. We don't really have many worse hands in our range here, but ultimately, okay, yeah, this guy is. Oh, okay, he's capable of bluffing river, and we block jack 10. I don't think he checks a turn with jack 10. I'm going to fold this spot. With a bit more time, I might decide to hero there because he doesn't really rep a whole lot. So let's just take a look at that. Oh, I think the hand history is not saved again. I thought that had been fixed with the most recent update. There we go. So I'll try and discuss this while going through hands under the tables. So pre seems pretty standard. He min raises a cut off. We defend big blind. Nothing else to do there. We're going to peel once on this flop. It's pretty close, but I think it's probably just about okay against his small sizing. And we're just going to fold now. Because we could be drawing close to dead. Is he Montenegrin? No, he's Serbian, so he's not. No, he bots. I think against his sizing ace-10 suited can just be a fold. So he c-bets a flop, we call, seems pretty standard. Because he seems fishy and because the big blind doesn't squeeze a lot, we're going to call here. So this turn, all of a sudden our hand's really low in our range. So we probably peel the flop with not many hands that aren't better than our hand on this turn. So I think we can essentially, because we're not peeling under pairs, we don't. So maybe we have like 10-8 suited with a backdoor flush draw. That's pretty much going to be it, I feel, for weaker hands. Maybe 10-8 suited and jack 8 suited with backdoor flush draws. I think we peel on the flop. So that's going to be what, 6 combos. So This is the bottom of our range. I don't think leading has much merit because is Goofy a fish? Two tabling, so I'm not certain. We could code for this, but I'm not a big fan. So I think there is possibly a legitimate strategy which involves leading this turn some percentage of the time. But that's purely exploitative, and it's because I don't think regs are going to play very well against it. His range is clearly stronger than ours. Both players probably have all combos of Jack 10, and he has aces and queens and possibly kings. Well, we just don't have those hands. I don't think we want a raising range on this flop because it hits his range so much harder than ours. So we could exploitatively lead the turn, but I don't think that's going to be something to do with us, a specific reader, which we don't have here. So I do think the turn should be a check fold for us as it defaults. I just need to update these tags. But the turn checks through. So having had that discussion about our hand being really low in our range, I think we have to consider what our range for reaching the river looks like. Against the fish, I don't think we want to turn our hand into a bluff here. So we have 16 combos of Jack 10. We probably also have pocket 9s and ace 9 that we want to value bet. So that's 19 combos. We'd probably defend all ace 9 pre. That's going to be I think that's going to be 28 combos. They don't hold me to that. So that's 28 value combos. So on the question of whether we want to turn this hand into a bluff, if we have, we thought earlier that we had 10-8 suited and Jack-8 suited. They're just complete air here, with a backdoor flush draw on the flop. That's 6 combos. So clearly we do want some more bluffing combos than that if we're going to stay balanced, which I think is probably a decent enough idea. And I think this is probably going to be a good hand to start bluffing with. The reason being that we don't really what's his 4-bet range like? Just gonna fold that. We don't really block much that's adverse to his bluffing his hand. So I guess we block some stuff that he might decide to fold, like king queen, not king queen rather, but for instance queen jack and queen 10 himself. But I don't think those hands are going to see back the flop in the first place. So it certainly feels like this hand is going to be a decent hand to bluff. I mean, his calling range here is probably going to be mostly ace jack, ace 10, and we do block ace 10, so that's good. His flop sizing here is actually quite big, so I'm going to be wary. Yeah, and just fold his turn. So I think this is going to be a good hand to bluff. We probably also have all combos of queen jack. So we had, what did we say, 28 bluff combos, value combos, 6 legitimate bluff combos. And we also probably have most combos of queen 10 and queen jack pre. So I don't think we want to be bluffing all of those, and I think it's going to be a good randomizer to simply decide to bluff queen 10 ahead of queen jack. Not because it's actually a better hand to bluff with, but simply because it's it's an easier way to split your hands, to split our hands into the two ranges than any other factor. We're gonna fold this because some of the guns in it. So I think not bluffing this river is a mistake. When he overbets, so certainly I feel that firstly it's hard, it's really tough to see what's his value betting here. So I guess maybe an ace-5 suited makes sense. But I certainly feel that we can check some two pair on this river. So I don't think he can go much wider than that in terms of overbetting for value. He shouldn't really have any king, queen, jack, 10, ace, queen, ace, king type hands. I don't think he c-bets pocket fives. So he does rep super thin, and we do have a note which indicates here when it loads that he is capable of overbetting as a bluff. So because our range looks really weak when we do check this river, I think we can probably exploitatively call this spot. And if I'd had more time to think about it, I think I probably would have, but for some reason my time bank was low, which is unfortunate. But by the way, I'm just realising I can't remember much of the hand while I've been discussing this, so I may have made some horrific mistakes, like folding aces pre or something. So if I folded aces pre, that's not a good idea, don't copy me. Clearly calling here is super exploitative. Like, this is so close to the bottom of our range, such that we believed we should have been bluffing it. We're going to range check this ace turn because it hits his range much harder than ours. With a gut shot we might want to bluff, but I don't think we do. Because we are range checking the turn, I think we have enough. We have all of our value hands in our range, so I think overbetting the river is a good idea. But when he makes a really nifty turn check like that, perhaps it's not. So certainly, if we want to call unexploitably on this river, we need to be folding queen 10, because I don't think the fact that it blocks jack 10 is particularly relevant. And it's more relevant, I feel, that it blocks the 10, which possibly contains some hands, which possibly blocks some hands that he could be bluffing with. But given how narrow his value range is, because he can sometimes check back stronger jacks on the river, we're not going to overbet here. I think potting is a better idea, but we do have a ton of bluffs, so I feel we can happily use a large sizing as we did. Because he can peel the turn pretty wide with 9x and 10x, I think we can probably just bluff this river even though he's a bit fishy. So I think that's probably quite an interesting hand. I don't really like his river line just because his value range is so thin. It makes it a really easy call for us every time we have an ace, because we block his value range so effectively. But if he's playing his range in a different way on a turn to the way we expect, then maybe it's okay. So, back to a more live setting. The weirdo, how many tables is he playing? He's playing 2 tables, so we're going to tag that. We're probably going to 4-bet here. We're going to 3-bet this. And this, I think, is going to... Oh, that's disgusting. First inclinations are cool. Because I mean, I think if he's a tall and reasonable player, this is a clear fold, but we don't know that. And if he's a tall fish, this line is just going to be spazzed so often that I think we have to call. Okay, yeah. It always feels really, really horrendous calling that sort of bet, but because there is going to be a decent chunk of the time that you're just going to be drawing dead, but I feel it's probably going to be plus EV to do so. With this sizing, I mean, this is a flop which clearly favours his range. I think we should probably peel this with a backdoor flush draw. But I think this is a spot where he can get away with overfolding without being too worried. Simply because flops like that are only going to come relatively rarely, so it's not a spot in which we should really be overly concerned about being exploitable. Big blind 3-bets is we can 4-bet this. In fact, I think 4-betting is going to be a fun option this time. We don't know how much he's 3-betting, but I don't think calling out his position is going to be an option. But considering there's more of a culture of calling 4-bets down, excuse me, I think we want to be bluffing this river. A lot of our hands have become pairs by now. Considering there's more of a culture of calling 4-bets, I think that, especially blind against blind, our 4-bet bluffing range wants to be more weighted towards hands which play decently well post-flop than it would have even 6 months ago. So, I just want to quickly talk about the flop c-bet here. I think it illustrates pretty effectively a way in which we can't rigidly divide our hands into value bets or bluffs, because here we don't really expect him to fold better ever, and we don't expect him to call that with worse that often except a few ace high floats. But I feel this is still a hand we want to see bet, because check calling is going to be so disgusting. It's probably minus EV, because when we do check this flop, because it's going to be one in which we don't really want to make a huge amount of effort in protecting our checking range. He's probably going to be he is going to be able to effectively multiple barrel when we do check. We're going to peel here. Because there's a fish in big blind, we're going to open a cutoff slightly smaller and also open a7 offsuit. Yeah, and we also have some equity when called, and we also protect our hand against his folding range, which pretty much always has at least 2 overs against our hand. Because the opener is slightly fishy, we're going to bet here. Most of the time, because it favours his range, we would check a lot more, and because he's also pretty tight and going to showdown, we're going to check call rather than betting this river. Simply because he should have all ace king queen in his range for checking back that flop, which is going to be a decent number of combos. Though I guess his line's okay, and I think he should probably have some other diamond combos / straight draw combos that he peels a turn with as well. So while checking back the river with ace queen of diamonds specifically is probably good, I think he might also start bluffing, say jack 10 of diamonds, if he doesn't see better. We're just going to fold this, and I'm actually going to have to take a quick break. Sorry, something's come up. So when this stops being crashed, what's happening? Oh no. Here we go. So when this stops being crashed, we're going to sit out next hand, and I'll stop the recording and be back in about 5 minutes. This just seems like a clear lead to me on its own. So yeah, so I'm just going to pause the recording here and right, I'm just realising, I think, that I paused and cut myself off in the middle of the sentence there. So I'm back, and The rest is going to be an interruption-free, fantastic video, as per. Don't think we can really fold to the half pot donk here, and he's donking the flop a decent amount. I think we can sort of infer some small elements of sizing tell. So I think because of his sizing, he's more likely to have a weak pair or draw than an ace here. So especially given the odds, I think we want to peel again. This is no value in betting river. Here I'm going to call. I think King Queen is a hand which can go either way, calling or folding, and indeed even 4-betting some percentage of the time. Because this player is c-betting a lot in 3-bet pots, I think, especially on this type of texture, it's going to be an effective strategy to bet pretty small with a very wide range, because we expect him to bet most of his overpairs most of the time, and especially with that speed of check, his range should be left very weak. Again, the big blind's a big nit here, so we're going to min raise. And after this strategy, I feel it's often a pretty effective to bet large on the turn, because a lot of regs sort of decide that against a small bet they really need to raise the flop with any of their stronger hands, despite the fact that when we do use that sizing, we're doing it with the whole range. I think against the sizing we need to peel eights. The question is whether we can value bet this river. I think we probably can, but it's pretty thin. He's not folding ace king, obviously, but if he shows up with tens through queens there, which I think is somewhat likely after he check calls twice, I think he's going to decide he wants to call those as well. Yeah, 9-10 suited also makes sense. 10-9 suited. Although that's a pretty loose river call. But on the plus side, he does happen to block some of our boats, which is something he may perceive as to take this line with. Just seeing this type size, big blind's probably a fish, so I should have 2.5x to that. Both blinds are nits, so we're going to min raise this. He's in particular folding lots of steals, so we're going to take a tag which indicates that. The games have been very soft lately. This is the 28th of December, which is also a Sunday, and the big 5 million tournaments, Sunday Million, is also on, which is leaving games pretty soft. But clearly there still tends to be 3 or 4 regs per table. But it certainly helps in terms of playing higher volume while still having a decent edge on the field. Both no indication that the blinds are folding too much, so we're going to 2.5x to that. King Queen is a hand that you can definitely 3-bet blind against blind, but the guy's slightly messy, so I don't think it's going to be a spot where we want to be making 2 loose 3 bets. I'm going to 3x because the fish in a small blind and bet small here. He's also c-betting a lot, so I think explosively we probably want to bet this, so I think it's probably check as part of a balanced strategy, though I can't be certain of that. And this is going to be a turn we want to barrel and use a pretty large sizing, because here we should be pretty uncapped, whereas I don't think is going to check call his flop a lot with strong hands. I don't think we can overbet though, because I think he still has probably pocket nines, pocket jacks. Well, we definitely don't have jacks, and sometimes we use 3-bet nines pre. Obviously making the nuts on the river is nice, and we can still use a pretty nice sizing as the flush draw is whiffed. Ace 9. Okay. That's a very loose cooldown. I guess he doesn't check jacks on the flop if he feels he has to cool down with that. Or maybe he's just bad. I mean, I had about 200 hands on him, I think, so we can't exclude that as a possibility. We're going to 2.5x this from the cutoff because both blinds are nits. Fish, rather. There's a fish in a small blind, and the people left to act. There's a guy who doesn't 3-bet often, and someone who seems like a nit fish, so we're going to be pretty happy to open Jack 9 suited under the gun. We're going to 2.5x from the fish. We can defend King 4 suited. We're going to peel Ace 4 suited here. It's not ideal, but I think it's probably okay, and on that flop we're just going to check fold. This guy's bet versus missed is pretty low, but his 1-1 saw flop is high, so I think check calling is going to be the best route there. Obviously that's a pretty terrible run up. I think we should probably actually have led the turn, because we'll be perceived to check call a lot of ace-x, whereas he won't bet most of his on the flop. I was considering bluffing river for a second, but ultimately I think we have some hands which are worse in our range. So sometimes we're going to check call 7s or 6s there, which I think is going to be a better hand to bluff than, well, for obvious reasons, than a jack. Because with a jack we also block some of the range we want him to fold, like jack 10 and queen jack. Missing a big blind, so we're going to raise this. I feel he's going to be folding a lot here, but betting a7 with no draws is such a tremendous deviation from what I feel we should be doing against an optimal player that it's not a play I'm going to make. And I think having checks at turn, we do need to just check down, because we don't really have much prospect of folding out many better hands. We're 2.5xing the cut-off because the buttons are shorty, or the button's short, and because it's only 35 big blinds, we expect to be ahead of his 3-bet calling range. Precisely. Undergun has been folding lots of 3-bet so far, but it's too limited a sample to 3-bet 9-7 suited there, I feel. 5-4 off is close here. I'm just going to fold, play a little nitty for now. Against the min raise, would normally defend King 3 off in the big blind, but because he's only opening 22% of buttons so far, we're going to fold. Schmug is one tabling. We're definitely going to use a large sizing on this flop, and not just because you have a strong hand. We do so with our entire betting range. I think it's going to be a spot where out of position, and in particular we're going to want to start check calling a lot of hands. So I think we probably want to be over betting this turn. Our range is uncapped, and I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to be raising or nearly all 2-pair plus on his flop, so we have a ton of hands that we can value bet for any size. Which, I mean, I've talked about overbetting in other videos, so I'm not going to go into the theory right now, but it's essentially the fact that his range is capped now means it's a good spot to overbet with a balanced range. Although sometimes I feel that exploitatively a lot of people at 100 are just really overfolding against overbets, so perhaps we should only be doing this as a bluff. Don't think there's really any option with Jack 5 here, but check call down. Yeah. I mean, even though he is betting the river with Ace King there, which I think is fine. I think betting the river there is great. I don't think he's going to bet call. We're just going to bet pretty big here because he's a fish and we expect him to peel with any draw anyway. Though I think in general we're probably going to be using a slightly smaller sizing against good players. That turn card gave him a few more draws and it improved a lot of his range, so we're going to continue using large size. Can we jam this river? How much does he have behind? He's Russian. I think we probably do want to jam this river just in case he decides to bet call Jack 10. It's thin, or any 10 for that matter. It's thin, but some draws miss, so he can level himself. I think he'd probably size his bigger if he has a 6 a lot of the time. So I think ultimately jamming is going to be more profitable than calling, although both are clearly very profitable options. And this half pot bet size plays a big part of the reasoning process there because we rarely expect him to use that sizing. It looks a lot more like a block bet than anything else. I always feel like such a nit when I look at my HUD and I'm playing 21-15 or something. Against a 63% opener, we could consider 3-betting this, but I'm just going to flats, given stack depth. Not folding this on the flop, and definitely not on that turn. I think the only interesting question here might be whether to call rivers. I think that's a river we don't want to be calling, because we should have some 7x in our range, but not enough to justify leading the river, especially considering he's already become more polarized relative to a flop bet. But with the Ace of Hearts, we also block some of his bluffs, which makes basically any route which involves putting more money in the pots less attractive. We're just going to min raise this. What did he show up with actually? King 10, that's fine. Sixes, given we're 3-way, we have less for defense responsibility, so folding sixes on the turn is absolutely standard. Because, so, given his bet sizing, the better's auto profits frequency doesn't change, but we need to defend relatively less often to prevent him auto profiting, because we expect the other player in pot to defend some percentage of the time as well. We're going to... He's a fish, so probably just going to go for 3 streets pretty large with Ace Jack there. I think he's going to raise flushes anyway, so I think betting here is clearly superior to check raising. Not going to bet that big because we want to entice him to call with top pair hands. Because both blinds are over folding to steals, we're going to make a very loose open with 7-4 off there. Yeah, so if we consider what various parts of his range are doing on that river, he's overfolding to basically everything, and we do have some small amount of backdoor equity, so I think c-betting here is fine. If we consider what he's doing with various parts of his range, against a small bet especially, I think flushes are raising, except for really small flushes, which might not be bet calling anyway. I think aces are much more likely to call against a small bet than if we bet like 20 something. Because there's a fish and a big blind, we can call here. I think we probably lose a bit of value against a 9 by using a smaller sizing, but he shouldn't, because I don't think he's going to raise that. But I don't think he shouldn't have many 9s in his range. And obviously against weaker boats and bluffs. Okay, so his bluffing range may change a little bit. He might start bluffing with a tighter range, which isn't ideal, but we only get one bet out of that slightly wider range of bluffs anyway. And if he still has a bluff raising range, then we get a ton of money off that. And we probably stack worse boats either way. Although he might decide to raise some of those on the flop or the turn. Though I don't think it's a good strategy for him to have a flop raising range there, just because his range is so much weaker than ours. We're 3-betting a bit bigger than normal here because it's stack depth. We could consider turning this into a bluff. I'm just going to check down this time, but I will have to think about it later, and we definitely don't want to be bluffing this river. Because we do win a showdown a decent percentage when it's checked down in this spot. I mean, I expect against the lower pair, yeah. But when he does check that flop, we don't have a lot of hands we can use to effectively bluff given pre-flop positions. Most of our pre-flop flats which aren't pairs are broadways, which obviously have better or have at least better pairs than our hand on this turn. So it's kind of tough to construct a bluffing range. What's he folding to turn? He's folding too much to turn probe, so I'm going to leave this. Excuse me. So in terms of, I think we're probably going to be under bluffing this turn if we don't bluff this hand. But I also don't expect him to be thinking a significant amount in game. A significant enough amount. So essentially, I expect him to continue with any ace x or king x anyway. And I'm just going to check this flop because it's a board on which we don't want to bet too much, and also we do block some of his continuance range. Against the fish, we're just going to expose him to bet pretty small here. And we expect him to massively overbluff this river. I'm actually going to go for a super small, super thin value bet and hope to get called by king high. Okay, that's nissy. 8. We do rather defend this hand in 9s, but I think we just want to fold here because we do have other stuff that we like to defend. So yeah, in conclusion on this hand, I think on the turn, if we don't bluff this, we likely can't really construct a bluffing range without including some hands which have simply 0 equity against the calling range. But because I don't think people are going to be thinking about the spots in game in enough detail to realise that, I think checking becomes superior, especially as I think a lot of people also aren't going to start bluffing deuces through 5s on the river, as they aren't really thinking in terms of them being super low in that range. So we're actually going to just sit out next big blind here. I think this has been a pretty interesting video. There should have been a fair amount, especially the spots we discussed in more detail, I think have been pretty interesting. We're just going to over limp here because he's 12-10 over a sample, a 50 hand sample rather, which I think is enough to start drawing some conclusions. Yeah. Where's this from? Okay. And I think he just has aces here. I'm going to peel this because we're in position. We haven't seen him 4-bet bluff yet, but it just plays too well with deep. We don't want to be folding too much to 4 bets. and we can get flops like this, which we can barrel very aggressively on. We're probably just going to barrel off here, because it's going to be the bottom of our range on nearly any rivers on which we don't pair. And it also expects most guys to be playing a strategy which involves c-betting nearly all over pairs on this flop. Okay, so apparently we've got one more hand. I think this is actually going to be an open in the small blind, considering we've had some indication at some points whether the big blind's a bit fishy. So, more hands still. So, finally, on to the conclusion. I've been a definite article for Grinder School. Do let me know what types of video you'd like to see. I do ask this at the end of every video, but I very rarely get feedback, which is somewhat disappointing. So I do have some more of the Instructions Poker Theory series coming out. So as I mentioned, I think I have 3 videos of presentations ready to record, but finding time to record them is another matter at the moment. And there will be some more hand reviews at a later point. I'm also going to be hopefully putting on sale an ebook that's going to consist solely of detailed written hand reviews. So that will probably be in the $20 region. So if that interests you, PM me and I will on the Grinder School forums, and I'll add you to a mailing list for details. So thanks. Goodbye.